finally really did it. You maniacs!
If you've been with the channel for a while now, you've no doubt heard me talk about one of the previous 2 or technically 3 NuPhy keyboards I've had a chance to test out. Even though I didn't really like low profile switches, I ended up keeping the R60 due to its tiny form factor. For mobile typists or while you're staying abroad, it's a formidable companion, but at home I always craved something else, something bigger. The Halo65 fits right into those requirements. This is NuPhy's first foray into the big leagues, and what a great premiere this is. Excluding its portability, the board is bigger and better in almost every single way. The most surprising part to me though is the fact that they charge just $10 more, and I gotta tell you, for that, you get a lot of bang for your buck. Now, I never stated this in my previous videos as I thought it was pretty clear, but since this is the 3rd video I'm making about a NuPhy product, I thought it might make sense to just clarify that NuPhy has never and will never have any input on what I have to say about any of their products. But I do get to keep the keyboards, do to them whatever I want, and if you buy one of their products through the affiliate link down below, I do get a percentage of that sale, but that doesn't change my view. It never will. As it always is with my videos, I'll try to break it down into digestible sections. First we're going to have a look at the hardware, then the software, then the insides with some modding attempts, which in this case is just removing the included silicon, followed by some typing sounds, and finally the conclusion to this probably overly long video about a keyboard. So first things first, the Halo65 is, as the name suggests, a 65% full mechanical keyboard in a very familiar layout. What I got here is the white version. It also comes in black, both of which can be purchased with a matching wrist rest, although only the bottom piece of the rest is colored in. The rest of the wrist rest comes in this frosted look. It's a very solid addition, especially considering the $29 asking price. It measures about 318mm wide, 80mm tall, with a thickness of about 18mm. Since the Halo has such a common form factor, the wrist rest will work with other boards as well. For example, it matches up just fine with all of my other 60 or 65% keyboards. It's not perfect, but good enough to not be a hindrance. The construction is also surprisingly solid for the price, or at least it doesn't feel flimsy or too cheap. The bottom part is made of metal and screwed into the rest at the end, with a small branding embossed to the right, as well as NuPhy's circuit logo at the top of the frosted part. Considering the normally rather conservative approach to logo presence on these boards, the wrist rest has a bit of an over-treatment. Luckily, you won't notice it all that much during daily use. The first thing you're going to notice when you pick up the Halo65 is the weight and density. Whereas the previous NuPhy boards felt a bit hollow, dare I say it, cheap at some times, this one feels really good. It's premium, like you got something substantial in your hands. Now, it's nowhere near as heavy as one of the customs I got. For example, the QK65 weighs in at around 1.7 kilo, while the Halo is just 969.
Nice.
But nonetheless, it feels different than other Prebuilds I tried. I might go so far as to say that this, personally speaking, has been my favorite first impression out of the box. Just like with the wrist rest, there's a little more face-on branding this time around, with a notched NuPhy logo on the top right. In exchange, the backplate has been shrunken down, so less junk in the trunk and more funk in the front, if you catch my drift. The light bars, or light bar here, as we only have one horizontal one remaining on the top left compared to the 2 vertical strips on the previous models, is another NuPhy signature element that made its way over. I'm a big sucker for light strips, and even though I really enjoyed them in stereo, this horizontal version is something I like just as much. It's very reminiscent of the strip I got on my Trio 60. Actually, it's pretty much exactly the same, except that it does a little more than just highlight the caps lock. There are more NuPhy specific design cues that made their way into this bigger form factor. For example, the railings on the backside on the Airs have turned into a complete wraparound on the bottom half of the board, while still remaining on the underside as well. Speaking of the underside, we find NuPhy's signature orange feet making a return too. For the first time, however, we got ourselves some flip outs. Gone is the magnetism, and with that, the limitation of it only being able to lift up one level. 2 is the new height in ergonomic opportunities, and both steps are held in place with color matching rubber. Another construction specific design feature is the 2-piece housing. Like the old models, here too we have a plastic button combined with a metal top. I don't know how the black one looks in person, but on my white version here, depending on the light, the upper has a slight grey tint to it. This doesn't impact functionality of course, but it can be a bit distracting. Finishing up our outer inspection, we shall have a look at the backside, where we got small but not insignificant changes. For example, instead of having a dedicated Windows and Mac switch like on the Airs, we only have one for connectivity. To change the operating mode, you'll have to resort to a key press combination, like on the iQnix boards. Connection-wise, we have the same options as with the previous models. The only difference here is the change from written legends to embossed icons. However, they aren't perfectly centered. It sort of always looks as if it's set on the middle one, but that's not really an issue and another minuscule detail that can be ignored. To the right, we have the USB-C connector for either charging or wired operation, which moved back to the top position after a short excursion to the left on the R60. Speaking of charging and USB-C connectivity, thanks to Volta Charger for sponsoring today's video. This is the Volta Spark with its magnetic snap-safe tips, allowing you to use the same cable on all of your devices, including Lightning, USB-C and even micro USB. The cables support data transfers too, so you could attach them to keyboards and other peripherals alike. I also like to use it on my bike to power my phone while being on longer rides. It can save your device from perma damage when you fall, while also making it easy to detach when you need to take that all-important Instagram shot. But it obviously works for more common scenarios too, saving you from unnecessary and expensive repair bills with its design and lifetime warranty, as well as a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also pair perfectly with the Volta Giga Charger, which can push enough power to refill multiple devices at once while keeping desk clutter or travel bag sizes down. Great things do come in small sizes. So say goodbye to bulky adapters and put the power back in your hands with Volta. Click on the link in the description below to learn more. Alright, let's continue to look at the backside of the Halo65, which has one more interesting element to it, the USB dongle, or to be more precise, the storage compartment for it. I find it a bit ironic that on the portable-centric Air series we had the magnetic feet and dongle that couldn't be stored anywhere, while here on the arguably desktop-focused entry we got a perfectly sized storage hole as well as variable feet that are always available. Of course, this entry has a much more spacious housing that allows for this, but I couldn't resist a little chuckle when I first saw it.
That's pretty good.
Now, for NuPhy alums who are used to being able to place their boards onto laptops such as the MacBook Pro, will be a bit disappointed to find out that you can no longer do this with the Halo65. It's not intended to, but just in case you were wondering, the rubber feet are too thick and the spacing doesn't match the keys of the MacBook anymore. But of course, there might be laptops out there that will work, so just in case you were wondering, the feet measure 95mm apart from center to center. That's about it for the outer differences. There's a bit more going on under the hood, but for now, get your sunglasses ready because we're gonna talk about RGB. Now, as the name suggests, this board has quite a bit of glowing bits. Next to the usual per switch goodness, we also have the light strip up top, but arguably the star of the show is the ring that surrounds the entire board. Or halo, if you want to call it that. Each of these three elements can be individually configured and turned on or off. I won't go into detail about the switches or the light strip, as both remain largely the same. You get your usual share of different modes, activated by different means, and of course a set of different brightness levels to choose from. The strip can also be used to highlight the caps lock, indicate battery level, and tell you which profile you're on. However, there's also a new addition. When you reach a brightness limit, the light strip will blink white a couple of times to indicate that you've done so, which is neat. Unnecessary, but neat. The Halo is a much more noticeable addition and wraps all the way around the board, but that's not all. The insides are being enlightened as well. Not everyone is going to like this. For example, if you were hoping to just have the Halo on the outside, you're going to be sorry out of luck here. But this is a deliberate design choice, as the diffuser is designed to shine inwards as well, even going so far as to have extra parts to maximize glow power. Now, if you ask me, it would have been more classy if this wasn't the case, but as I am not the most RGB friendly person in the world, I'm probably not going to be the target for this. Moving on from the cosmetic lines to more functional parts, like with most prebuilds these days, we have three connection modes, that is wired using the included or any data cable, wireless via the dongle, and Bluetooth. Using Bluetooth, you can connect up to 3 devices including your phone or tablet, and seamlessly switch between them using function Q, W, E, or R if you want to go back to the dongle mode. Another change is the mentioned lack of a system switch. When you want to switch between Windows and Mac, you'll have to use function XS or function XA, which will swap the control and the command keys. The light strip will also handily indicate this, whereas it'll glow blue for Windows, white for Mac, and change when you switch between the different wireless modes as well as when you're charging. During my 3 weeks of using this board, I haven't had the need to do so. NuPhy states that the built-in 4000 mAh battery should last around 240 hours, and as their previous statements for the Airs were pretty accurate, I'm going to take their word for it. Lastly, when talking about functionality, we have NuPhy's console software. As this is a pre-build, we unfortunately don't get the joy of using VIA, but their offering isn't all that bad either. It gives you a much better overview and more granular controls for the switch lighting. Unfortunately, the strip and the Halo aren't part of that yet, and therefore not controllable. The rest remained largely the same. You can change each individual key to something else or even set up macros and save everything into handy custom profiles. There's also the additional game mode that cannot be cycled to via the key combos. Here you can set up individual keys with individual colors, making something that could highlight which ones have macros on them and which ones don't. I hope that NuPhy continues to invest in this software and that the Mac version will follow at some point, as it's still only available on Windows. For now, we have to wait, but something we can actually change are the switches and the keycaps. With every new board NuPhy releases, they also seem to be adding a new set of keycap profiles to their lineup. This time around, it's technically two. They included COP or KOP ones and a shine-through variant of it. Reading the comments from the R60 and 75 videos, a lot of you were missing an option like this, so it's good to see that NuPhy listened and finally added it, albeit only for the Halo65. Unfortunately though, I don't have a set on hand to test out, so I can't say how good these are and how well the RGB makes its way through. As the switches are north-facing though, I would assume that it should be reasonably well lit. Looking at the regular ones, they remind me a lot of the OSA caps from Keychron's Q line of boards, but not as intense, so rounded corners and a more substantial concave than regular cherry or OEM caps. They're also very smooth, almost slippery. I do enjoy when the caps have a little more texture to them, so I didn't end up liking these as much as I was hoping. Another oddity was the yellow spacebar. It seemed to be of a different breed, with a different border radius compared to the other caps. At first I thought the spacebar was just alien, wouldn't be the first time, but you get a host of extra keycaps with the Halo65, including a white spacebar, and that one looked exactly the same as the others. Also interesting to note, the yellow bar is the only keycap that is molded of a single piece. Even the white one, which does not have any legends on it, is a double shot, so I don't know if this was exclusive to my unit or if it's supposed to be like this. And if so, why?
Why?
Every other key looks fine though, using a double PPT construction as well as an additional two-tone look on the number keys for the alternate functions. However, I think those are likely to be die sublimated, so the fear of wonkiness returns to some degree. The lettering is, as is unfortunately with these prebuilds, again not that great. The delete button looks a bit drunk for example, and the same goes for the Apple command caps as well as some of the letters. At least they all look consistently inconsistent, unlike the random font generator that Keychron seems to be using. With the exception of the sub-legends, we also have level lettering thanks to the double shot construction. The great thing about a full-sized mechanical keyboard is the fact that you can use any keycaps you want. For example, Drops DCX black on white is a formidable classy match to the Halo65. Or switch it up with the Series 1 from Monokai, a great combination too. Really, the world is your oyster when it comes to the choice of caps, there's nothing holding you back this time around. Underneath it, we have two Switch series to choose from, either Gateron Pro 2s that I unfortunately am not a big fan of, although maybe I simply haven't found the right one yet, which includes these tactile browns that came with Wayud. The other option is a new collaboration between Gateron and NuPhy, the Baby Kangaroos. These are heavier tactiles and generally a much better fit if you ask me. They seem to be a bit more popular too, judging from their availability, but you can also buy them separately and use them on any other build like the QK65 for example. A short disclaimer here, prebuilds are never meant to be opened up. I like to do it because I'm curious to see what makes them tick. I also like to complain about things and nitpick around, but for most users this is probably not as relevant. That being said, if you at any point in time need to repair or replace something, the limitations mentioned here might be an issue that matter after all. The Halo65 definitely gets points for beauty as none of the screws are visible from the outside, but that can also be seen as a mark against it from a repairability standpoint, although they're just hiding beneath the keycaps, so it's not that bad. Additionally, they are painted white, but not the good kind as they start to flake off when I unscrewed them. I don't know how this is on the dark model, but maybe you get less flaky once there. Once removed, it was a bit tricky to figure out the next step. I used a little plastic separator I got from an iFixit kit and started to poke around. Lo and behold, the sides popped off, signaling a successful separation. The backside needed a bit more force before it cracked. Unfortunately, literally. Yeah, I snapped off the little prongs that hold the thing together. Luckily, this doesn't seem to impact the rigidity much, if at all. With the screws back in, it feels just as solid as it did before, but still, a pity and an unfortunate outcome as well as a warning sign for everyone else trying to open this up. Be careful, be gentle.
Be excellent to each other.
But after a brief moment of grief and frustration, I continued to see what wonders would await me. There was only a single daughterboard cable to be disconnected before the two pieces were fully separated. The first thing that struck me was the bottom silicon piece that fills almost every nook and cranny of the board. It's as if they poured it in while liquid and just left it in to harden before putting everything back together. The silicon feels similar to what you get in a QK65, if not a little softer and more flexible, and does its job well as we can hear in this little sound demo, comparing the Halo65 all stock with Kangaroo and then the same without the bottom silicon. The battery is held in by a double-sided tape and seems to be easily replaceable if needed. There is also another tiny PCB for the connectivity switch, similar to the previous models, and if we move to the upper floor, we have another 5 screws for the main PCB. At this point, it's probably wise to remove the switches. With the screws and them gone, the PCB can finally be removed and inspected. Most interesting is probably the LEDs that are strategically placed all around to form the halo. The rest of the board shares many similarities to its siblings, from the color to the little message with the lovely pixelated heart. Next up is the plate, which is held in by another 6 screws that can be removed from the back. I thought the weight would come from the top metal housing, but really it's the practically unbendable steel plate that's responsible for it. This is the reason why the Halo65 has a rather stiff typing experience, compared to the current trend of making everything bounce with flex cuts, gaskets, leaf springs, or some other exotic mounting system. This one here, much like other pre-builds, is set up on a rigid foundation of steel. This isn't necessarily bad, but something to take note of if you've become accustomed to or are looking for a softer feel. At this price point though, and comparing it to other boards it competes against, it is not uncommon. The clip-in stabilizers too are something we find on most pre-builds. They are generously looped and feel pretty good, but again, nothing out of the ordinary. What is not expected though is the use of 2 additional layers of silicon, PCB silicon and plate silicon. Now, I don't know if there are other boards that solely rely on silicon to dampen the sound. Also, if I say silicon one more time, I'm going to jump out of the window, but this here is definitely my first board that solely relies on silicon. Every other board, especially customs, usually use some sort of foam combination for the plate and PCB sandwich. I found this to be an interesting approach, but it doesn't seem to affect the sound all that much. As you hopefully could hear, there's not that much of a difference between the plate and PCB silicons, if any at all. But in the last example, I also tried it without the plate and PCB silicon, but added the bottom one back. That resulted in a slightly more open tone than all stock, which I kinda like. So there are variants that might make sense to try out. Otherwise, the build is pretty simple. Apart from the initial pushback with the prongs, I find the construction, especially with the rubbery pieces that shall not be named, pretty good. It was unexpected but very welcome. I don't recall any other boards that offers this much for this little. However, there is one bit that unfortunately did not make it into my unit, and that's the spacebar silicon. That's right, there is a fourth silicon which, according to the imagery and text found on NuPhy's website, should reside beneath the spacebar. I can only assume that this must have somehow slipped through QC on my unit. Maybe it has something to do with the weird one I got, who knows. It's a mystery, and I hope your spacebar, if you buy one of these, looks and sounds as it should. The Halo65 is a formidable keyboard for its asking price, and I thoroughly enjoyed using it. It's a great addition to NuPhy's lineup, and for anyone who's hoping the airs were a bit chunkier, this is the one you've been waiting for. With that being said, it has the usual NuPhy issues, like the damaged blocks I got during shipping, just like with the R75 and 60. Really, NuPhy, change your shipping, just put everything in a solid box. This too came in an unpadded plastic bag. As good as this board feels, again, just like with the 75 and the 60, you'll notice cost-saving measures, whether that's in the construction or the keycaps. It does feel better, but it could still be better.
Be better.
I've always been a big fan of their design language, and to see it translated this well into full-size body is great. I'm really curious to see what they come up with next. Judging from their track record, we're probably going to get something along the lines of a Halo75 or Halo80, but that's just me guessing. Whatever the case may be, I hope that one day we might even see an LS-style iteration, or something more obscure. Maybe it's just me starting to get a little tired of 60 or 65% boards, but something like a Tenet, but mass-produced, would be so welcome at this point. Although, considering the potential market, I'd say that's a less likely scenario. I also don't think that NuPhy is trying to conquer that area. They are aiming straight at the entry-level mechanical keyboards, and with the Halo65, they've pretty much hit the target right on the spot. This is a board that can be entirely sufficient right out of the box, and with a swap of switches and keycaps, it can also look and sound really, really good. So if you ask me, it's once again almost perfect. They did a pretty damn good job on this one.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun listening in to my ramblings. And as we're getting closer to the end of the year, I'm thinking of doing another giveaway coupled with the Q&A, so stay tuned as the item of desire is pretty cool if you ask me. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a good one, and see you in the next video. Bye!